is at 40. Okay, so 40 is obviously less than 60, so it makes it slow, but it marches out consistently. Okay, so it's regular. I have a P wave. Now it's hard to see on this. You can see it better on this. And it's a different. When they have 2 on here, one is a lead 2, and this is probably lead 1. Okay. So in this lead, I can see the P wave a little bit better. So I can see that there's P wave. Okay. So I have P waves. I have QRSs. It's a 1:1 ratio. Okay. My PR interval, if I'm looking at it, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 is 0.16, so it's still less than one big box. Okay. My PR interval is good, and my QRS is narrow, so I'm looking at it, it's 1, 2. It's still 2, so it's less than 0.12. So everything about it is normal, with the exception of the rate. The rate makes it slow, which makes it a sinus bradycardia. Okay. All right. Then we have sinus tachycardia. All the same information, except for my heart rate is going to be faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 120. So sinus tach is going to be at 120. I got P waves, I got QRSs, it's a 1:1 ratio. My PR interval is it's greater than 0.12, but less than 0.20. I've got a narrow QRS. Makes it a regular rhythm. These march out consistently. Okay, it's a regular rhythm, but it's faster than 100 beats per minute. Okay, that is sinus tach. Now, if I go above a certain rate, it's no longer sinus tach. It becomes a supraventricular tachycardia. Okay, just so you guys know, supraventricular tachycardia. We'll talk about that. Now, that was sinus rhythms. Okay, sinus rhythms, you're going to have a P wave. Okay, because it's coming from that SA node, and so you're going to get the firing, which is going to contract the atria, which is going to cause that contraction, which is going to cause you to have a P wave. Okay, so these are atrial. Okay, so atrial rates aren't going to necessarily have a P wave, or if it does, it looks bizarre. Okay, it's coming from a different area. So this is atrial fibrillation. So your atrial fibrillation means that it's just doing this. It's not actually beating, so it's just kind of quivering. So when we have atrial fibrillation, the atria are doing this, but the ventricles are still contracting. Okay, so that's atrial fibrillation. So we still have a heartbeat because the ventricles are still having contraction happening. Okay, so you're going to see it, and we're going to look at the rate. Okay, is it fast or slow? Well, this is 1, 2. Flying freaking out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. The rate is about 70. You can have really fast or really slow atrial fibrillation, and this is the reason why. I've got all these atria doing this. Every once in a while, that signal actually makes it through and creates a ventricular contraction. Boom, makes contraction. Boom, makes contraction. Sometimes it's going so fast, it's making the contraction go faster, right? Some of those are getting out there. Now, what happens is with atrial fibrillation, you have areas in the atria themselves, because of automaticity. It's like they said, mutiny, and they're going to do their own thing, right? And so they're firing on their own, and it's chaotic because everyone has said, no, we're going to do it. No, we're going to do it. No, I'm in charge. No, you. No, I am. Okay? And so everyone's kind of doing their own thing, and they're just doing this, and it's not in unison. Okay? So because everyone's doing their own thing, every once in a while, one of them gets through. You guys ever played Red Rover when you were younger? You know who's going to talk about. Every time you play Red Rover, right, you got this big line of people, and you're trying to figure out, okay, where's the thing? Okay? But you do Red Rover, the person that comes through, they're trying to break your arm, pretty much what they're trying to do, but they're trying to get through the chain, right? Well, that's the same thing. If you look at that person as the electrical signal, you have all these atria that are like, nice try, not going to happen, and when one gets through, it causes the contraction. Okay? And so that's why every once in a while you have that contraction. So that's why we still have a heart happening, even when the atria are like, whatever, let's try. Okay? That also is going to create an issue with the cardiac monitor reading the rate. Because the atria are doing this, you get this like bumpy line before you get a contraction happening. So you have this bumpy line. Well, how the monitor reads it is every little bumpy line is a beat. So your atrial rate is fast because you have this going like this. And then you have your ventricular rate, which can be fast or slow depending on how many of the signals actually make it through. Okay, your rhythm, is it regular or irregular? It is irregular. Now, when you first look at it, you're like, oh, it's regular. But you look at it, I've got 1, 2, 3, almost 4 full boxes. And then I got 1, 2, 3, possibly 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then I go back to 4. It is irregular. Okay, I don't have consistency with my R to R interval. Okay, we call this regularly irregular. Okay, it has a consistency to it, but it's not regular. Okay, so it's hard to when you first look at it, like, oh, that's regular. And you're like, what? No, wait, no, it's irregular. Okay, if you look at it from down here in a different lead, if you're having a hard time, look at it from a different lead. You're going to see all these little waves. That's the quivering happening. Okay, the defibrillation happening on the atria, and then you're going to have the QRS. You can tell that these ones are closer together than these ones. Okay, which makes it irregular. Now, can't tell a P wave. Okay, so we don't have a PR interval that we can look at. And we can have coarse or fine fibrillation. So remember, even in ventricular fibrillation, you have coarse waves, and then you have fine waves, okay? So you can have the same thing happening in atrial fibrillation, where you can have these coarse waves, or you can just have the fine waves coming through, okay? Either way, doesn't matter. It's not causing a contraction to happen. You're still going to get stroke volume happening, because when those valves open up, you're still going to have blood because of gravity that's going to be able to make it in there. Here's the problem with atrial fibrillation. Even though I have gravity opening that up, I have blood in that chamber that doesn't end up going anywhere. Well, what happens to blood when it doesn't move? It gets thick and it coagulates, okay? Which then can create a clot that ends up starting to move around. When it finally makes it down into the ventricle, it can move, okay? And so you have this blood that kind of just sits there and hangs out and gets kind of thick and coagulates, and then it gets taken out. So what do they do for people with atrial fibrillation? They give them medication that helps thin out the blood so that they don't have that issue with clotting. Okay, people who are of atrial fibrillation, a lot of times, depending on the reasoning for it, they may do a cardioversion, which means that they'll give them some electricity to kind of try to restart basically all those cardiac cells in the atria are going, woo, do their own thing, yay. And it sends out electric signal and basically slaps them and says, no, you're not going to do your own thing. You're going to go back to what your job is. Okay? They basically got caught having a house party when the parents went home. Okay? And so it tries to send it back. And, they'll go back, and then, the parents go away again, and it's all over the place, and they go back into atrial fibrillation. They will only cardiovert so many times before they just let you be in atrial fibrillation. But what ends up happening is that causes a weakening in the heart, and eventually they may have to have a pacemaker, an atrial, to be able to get that under control. Okay, I have a family member that has atrial fibrillation, and takes medication for it. They just give him blood thinners so that he doesn't end up drawing clots. Okay, but that causes a problem, right? When you're on blood thinners, what does blood thinners do? It reduces the amount of platelets in the system, right? The platelets in the system are reduced, so you have a trauma situation or an injury of some sort. It takes longer for the blood to stop, for you to stop bleeding. Okay. QRS is still narrow in atrial fibrillation because you're still getting even though you got this every once in a while the signal is coming through, and it's coming through from up top, so it's sending it down, so you're still getting signals coming down to cause a narrow QRS complex. So really quick, boom, boom, okay, boom, boom, okay, all right. So normal heart, okay, and then you get this happening where we get all over the place, and then every once in a while signals are getting sent down, and it's allowing for the contraction to happen. But you get this like reoccurring chaos that's happening. And what they try to do, they can also go in and ablaze the area. If it's a particular area that it's happening in, they can go in the heart and ablaze it. Remember when we watched the subarachnoid hemorrhage where they went in and did an ablation? They basically sizzled it and stopped it. They can do that on atrial fibrillation. Okay, it's not something that you do on a regular basis, but basically you're killing off those few little, mutiny cells that are doing their own thing. And you can't keep doing that because you're going to kill off all the cells. But if it happens to be reoccurring in the same place, they can do that. Okay.